is a discussion about public policy. But when we think about public policy and changes to public policy, and we talk about breaking the rules, a starting point for Uber is Uber actually an innovative company? Is Uber a company that has simply broken some taxi rules? So is it just an arbitrager of potentially bad public policy? And how has Uber dealt with the public policy barriers to its business in Australia, the US, and in Europe, where we've seen issues, for example, in France? So, David.
That's right, and 70 countries around the world. I found this morning's address quite thought-provoking. I'm sure many in the room did. The opposition leader was really making the case that innovation's great, hurrah, but you need to do a better job of selling it. And so we started from things are great. We had a better idea for how to get around a city, which would be cheaper, more reliable, safer, create jobs, help work on congestion. We had a problem that we wanted to fix as staff members, frankly, a personal problem. No grander vision than that, just trying to figure out our own problems and how to get around the city better. And we started from there, and we didn't have a grand plan to disrupt this or that. Clearly, we didn't spend enough time with the policymakers early on. We were single-minded about launching something we thought was great, which has since, I think, been proven to be great. But no one in a startup's got time to come visit Canberra or have the resources or even know who to call. So the plan was to build something we wanted to use and take it from there. So we've since been engaging much more in explaining, okay, well, what are we doing and what are the benefits from it? On Monday this week, actually, yesterday, down in Melbourne, in partnership with the IPA, we started releasing some of our own data showing what has been, what are the current traffic conditions in each city, how have they been changing over time, and actually talking about it in minutes. It's like, if you live in Parramatta and you commute to and from a city in Sydney, you're wasting an extra 2.5 hours other than you would have if it was free-flowing traffic. So we're talking about innovation in a way using real minutes rather than saying Infrastructure Australia would say congestion is costing the country $50 billion, which doesn't mean a lot to the average punter. We're saying your commute takes this many minutes longer than it should. So we're getting better at explaining what we do.
Okay, thanks, David. Just before passing on to Lara, how big is the problem, though, of getting governments to engage? So you finished up there talking about congestion. We know that the Victorian Infrastructure Victoria came out, I think, earlier last week, suggesting congestion charging as a solution to congestion on Victoria's roads. I think it was dismissed by the government in the same morning as it was released. So how do we get over that problem of governments just not being willing to engage?
Well, I can't comment on that decision, but it sounds like they're engaging very, very quickly. I suppose generally a lot of conversations begin with, all right, you've got this new thing, that's very exciting, and the governments are thinking, which box can we fit it into? What system do we currently have? What policy do we currently have? Rather than starting from scratch, which is what could it be? What's the opportunity here? So that's perhaps saying that there's no lack of engagement, but maybe just a bit too much rigidity.
Okay. Lara, that's a good segue into Tesla, and particularly the power storage of Tesla. We've seen some great press. If you guys wanted some great press, nothing better than the blackout in South Australia. I suspect you've all read stories about how this household or this individual was able to keep on operating perfectly well because of their battery storage during the power blackout. Where does power storage fit in here? What are the technical challenges for power storage? And how do they fit in with the regulatory challenges? How do they fit in with the national electricity market, which is a very highly, in a sense, an artificially constructed, highly regulated market? So if Alan Finkel was asking you, look, what role does battery have here? How would you start responding to him and thinking about the public policy issues?
I think we often think about the sort of technical opportunities that battery storage can provide to our grid, and I think it's sort of worth reflecting on. It's something that we do in terms of how our electricity system is set up and what storage can do for it, and how the nature of storage is slightly different to what we've seen before, and so it causes us to reflect on what that means for our system. To give you some tangible examples about that and then come back to your direct question. When, people would know the electricity system, we've heard a lot about it, is sort of focused on supply and demand and matching those. And, you think about turning your air conditioner on and the electricity market works to balance that. You think about turning your steel furnace on and off and the electricity market still works to balance that. And you don't have to be an engineer to start to realise that's actually pretty extraordinary. And so a lot of money and focus has gone into creating that balance. I think the exciting thing about storage is, up till now we've had limited ways in which we could use storage, so we had to get that balance right. There's pumped hydro, there's hot water, but I think with sort of the lithium-ion batteries that are coming, ours and others, it now provides a way that's sort of atomic or modular, it's adaptable, and it's also affordable, and I can speak on that later. And what that does mean is now we've got a new buffer or opportunity into our electricity system that we didn't have before. That said, those products and our products, they are adaptable and they change really rapidly, and to the extent of that, overnight. So people that have driven one of our vehicles would know we've sort of got a 17-inch touch screen and limited number of buttons, and that's because we keep evolving our product. We learn from the fleet, we realise what we could do, and then we put an over-the-air update. So in some ways, the day one that you buy be it your battery storage or your vehicle, that's actually when it's at its worst in terms of function, because we keep releasing new updates to improve that function. And so where do I think that batteries fit into, say, our national electricity grid, and what do we need from a policy perspective? In terms of where they fit in, I'm excited because not only do they provide that backup, but some of the other qualities of our grid, frequency, inertia, that get less publicity. I think in terms of policy and where that comes in, the important thing is, and I think it's something that we try to do now, not to regulate for technologies, but to regulate for outcomes, because our technologies, other technologies are changing overnight. So it's only when you regulate for outcomes that you can really get that technology coming to be the solution.
Okay, thanks, Lara. How do you get that sort of outcomes focus, though? How do you avoid policy that is at best outputs-based? Because outcomes are hard to measure. So how do you avoid, if we even get outputs-based, that's good. Often we end up with policy that's inputs-based. So how do you actually get that outcomes-based policy?
Yeah, I should say too, I think it's certainly not us alone that have been looking for it or seeking it, and technology agnostic policy or regulation is not particularly easy. I think if I did have the one silver bullet, then maybe I'd be in a different role. And I don't think there is a silver bullet, but I think it's just being really aware where you've baked in a particular assumption and highlighting those and making then our rule change process, because inevitably that will happen in times, fast enough to respond the way that technology can. Okay.
So Andrew, Australia Post.
Yes.
Mate, I'm not sure what you're doing up here, mate. I mean, sorry to mention this, but I have been on for public record as noting that once the NBN's rolled out, Australia Post should be. Don't want to write the funeral service for you guys yet, but. You're a company that makes money out of shifting bits of paper around the country. I mean, come on. Where's technology fit with Australia Post, Andrew?
We were, absolutely. And that's part of the ongoing discussion we're having around how both our business has been fundamentally disrupted by the opportunity that the digital age has presented itself. And what we're doing is maturing this discussion for our own business. Because whilst there's an old-fashioned notion of the definition of our organisation, it's probably come from two key things. One was our long history. We're Australia's oldest continually operating organisation. The second part is that our business has been built over time from what has been a fundamentally physical service that's helped to facilitate paper-based delivery. of letters and things like that. But in 2010, we started a very important change program where we said to ourselves, our aspiration must be that everything that we do physically, we have to be able to do digitally for our customers, and that in the process of reinventing ourselves, the thing that is critically important is that we need to do that in a way that leverages everything that technology can provide for us, but enable us to reinvent around a key purpose of wanting to help to deliver people who shop online. And the second part is helping with the fundamentals of providing a suite of trusted services that are performed inside of communities, that happen in a post office and so on. And when you think about online shopping, for us, the whole notion of how you connect an online merchant to a marketplace, to a shopper, intrinsically involves all of the business models that are disrupting the world today. And these are now a mainstream part to the competency that exists inside of our organisation. So yes, once upon a time, for our letters business that we still continue to be proud of, that was true, but it's not true for us anymore. Now what is true is the technology and competency acumen around how we execute, how to an online shopper to improve the experience they have with parcel delivery through a MyPost experience that ensures that they can either get it in a parcel locker or they can safe drop it to the home, and they're more empowered on getting what they want, when they want, and where they need it. For a merchant, they can improve their supply chain because they can integrate with our API, and this is something that's mature and mainstream of how we enable these businesses to operate. But our focus has shifted as well, very much now on how we leverage technology to drive innovation in the types of customer experiences that we're wanting people to have with us in future. And there's two key areas perhaps where we're looking at that. And one is around digital identity. Today, Australia Post plays a great role where we verify a quarter of the Australian population. But moving forward, we're wanting to extend that and match the fact that our customers have preferences of wanting to be able to also do that digitally. So our investments are running in our organisation about bringing that as an option that then extends in terms of ability to provide someone to be able to do that from their smartphone. The second key area is that we are investigating through trials the ability to facilitate parcel delivery via drones. And both of these particular technologies, and in particular the drone technology, is another one that starts to confront the basis of how to create a commercial opportunity around something that does require regulation, and how we move forward in a progressive way to be able to bring that to life or not.
Can I just follow up on that last one? So, we had a joke before because apparently Australia Post itself looked at rocket delivery of mail back in the 1930s, I think it was.
A little before my time.
Yeah, and US Post actually looked at using cruise missiles to deliver mail. Your mail with a bang. I suspect there was no warhead on them. And drones may go the same way, but may not. It may be the case that in 20 years' time, of course parcel delivery is by drone. How could it not be? Or it could be the case in 20 years' time, people look back and sort of snigger and say, imagine trying to use a drone for a parcel. What a stupid idea. How could they have even thought that? That's not the point. The point is presumably that you need to have a government approach to public policy that is willing to let companies like Australia Post or Tesla or Uber experiment. So can you give us a bit of background on how hard you found it to change the regulations? Because Australia Post has been through a recent change in regulation around the standard letter. How hard Australia Post found that? Was it easy? Was it hard? I don't know. And then just a comment on that issue of how do you have a public policy environment that allows companies to experiment within a regulatory framework that tends to be rigid?
They're two very broad topics, both of those, but in terms of answering the first one, our letters service is a proud service that we provide, but obviously one that has operated under regulation that was changed last year. And just to give everyone a sense of the backdrop to that, so up until the year 2000, our letters business had been growing every year up until that point. The regulation that underpinned that was set at a point in time really before the internet really formed, before Google appeared, before an iPhone turned up, before people started using email, before Facebook fundamentally changed the basis of how people could communicate. And as our letters started to plateau in terms of their volumes in the year 2000, by the time that got to 2008, we then started to decline in the volume of letters that existed. This business that had grown and had taken over 200 years to get to these volumes then started to decline. From the year 2008 to today, that business has declined by 50%. So we are sending 50% less volume, or managing 50% less volume than what it took 200 years to build. And when you go back to 2008, at that point in time, whilst you can kind of see what the trajectory was, the regulation that governed that service was changed last year. And so we started a process whereby we needed to consult openly with governments and communities around just what that service needed to be. What did people want? What needed to be appropriate? And to start the conversation around what they expected in terms of their letter delivery service, whether that needed to be 5 days a week, whether there was an opportunity to have different speed products as existed in other parts of the world, and to make sure that that was a process that the communities who have depended upon this service were okay about the fact that it was time that that needed to be changed. And that was a 2-year process, an incredibly important process that we went through to end up at the point that we were at with that regulation then being changed in the latter part of last year. What that's meant, though, is it's provided a future for communities who continue to rely upon that service. It's provided a future for post offices that otherwise didn't necessarily have one. It's enabled us to be able to ensure that some parts of the community that we needed to make sure we looked after as this service was changed, that they weren't disadvantaged by that. And so that's been an important aspect of what we've stepped in to go and do. But as you look at a parallel then to the second part, perhaps of your question, as we perhaps approach our parcel delivery business, this notion of delivering by a drone. Now, we can't make any forecast around what will happen inside of this space, but we know that we need to learn. So early this year, we started a process and we did a closed trial in collaboration with CASA to ensure that we wanted to understand just how this type of technology could facilitate the delivery of a parcel, but it was a closed trial. Right, so we did it in a very contained way, and it was just ensuring and understanding just how the fundamentals of that technology could deliver a parcel. And that kind of got through the point that it did. The point that we're at now, though, is we want to run another trial. I want to do another trial next year that's looking at taking the advances that have happened inside of that technology, and some of those advances have actually progressed faster than regulation, and to talk about how we might investigate the opportunity of parcel delivery via drones, but leveraging it in a way that tests a couple of really important things. One is, what's the customer's experience? Do people really ultimately want this? Do they feel safe? What does it do about their privacy? What's the experience like when they actually receive a parcel that way? Is that something that they want? And that'll help to inform not only the design of the technology, but ultimately what that offer might be shaped to be. But the second part about it is where it does test a bit of the regulation. The technology now enables you to be able to fly a drone beyond the line of sight. And it also enables you to fly, for an individual operator, to fly more than one drone at a time. Now, the regulation doesn't allow for that. But to create a commercial opportunity that could facilitate that, that would need to be true in order to do that. So what we'd like to do, with permission of course, is to work with CASA to go and embark on a second trial that would look to test for those incredibly important things. Now, we know drones are used in a number of different areas in commercial operation now, but the application as it applies to our post business and our Star Track business is really different as it looks at parcel delivery. And so whether it's next year or 5 years or 10 years, when this thing materialises, we know we need to learn. We know we need to take an approach whereby we work with and we work together on how we can create something that is safe, and something that is reliable, and to ensure it's something that customers can depend upon as we then work into the future.
Okay. Permission. Interesting word, David. If Uber wanted to deliver standard letters tomorrow around Australia at a price that is, or in parts of Australia, at a price that was the same as Australia Post charges, it would actually be illegal for it to do it. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to have this discussion on a business case afterwards. If you go down there, I'm in for 10%. But that issue of requiring permission, Uber around the world has faced the issue, not just in taxi laws, but you're currently fighting a range of issues on labour laws in the States and have a case on appeal as to whether an Uber driver is an employee or a contractor. You've got issues with tax laws, and you weren't happy with the ATO's ruling on GST. I don't know if that appeal's still underway. But to what degree is there a need for permission to be able to innovate? Or is it important just to innovate and drag the public policy along behind you?
Earlier in the conversation, you asked Lara, how do you regulate this outcomes-oriented way of doing policy? And I think it's related to this question. With a lot of new technologies, it's a tough job to try and regulate something you haven't seen. Doesn't stop people trying, but it's clearly, we believe, and we've demonstrated, you've got to put it out there, you get the reaction from the most important people, the customers, consumers, and then you can decide whether you've got something that is even going to exist, and then even needs any regulation around it. There's some important red lines, and you didn't mention these. Safety is something that we don't compromise on, and no one else at this table would either. And so, from day one, we've been pretty proactive about explaining what we do on that stuff. But then innovating around the business model and how we make money and how the service is delivered is kind of what the businesses do. So parcels for 45 cents doesn't sound fun. We deliver food. Uber Eats is live in 5 markets across Australia. But that's kind of our thing. Press a button, get something in 5, 10, 20 minutes. We can do that very, very efficiently. That's what we're built for. But thinking about how to cheaply move a whole bunch of things over a day or two is not our current business plan.
Okay. Lara, can I come back to you and issues, I'm going to say issues generally of market power. In some ways, we've got 3 innovative businesses, or representatives of 3 innovative businesses up here. But if we had a 4th, which was, say, Google, then what is occupying the minds of its senior executives is not often, should I call it Google or should I call it Alphabet? Anyway, I'll keep calling it Google. Is not necessarily what the next innovations are. It's that there are claims that the innovation leads to market power. They're fighting cases, particularly in Europe. They're claimed, or there have been claims that they are in a position, because of their innovation, to abuse market power. Now, Tesla's not in that situation with batteries, but to roll out your battery storage, you need to deal with distribution companies. And distribution companies are generally monopolies, they're generally regulated monopolies. So with Tesla, how do you see the issues of market power within the NEM or more generally? How do you see that as affecting your business case? And is there a problem that businesses that actually are innovative and become very successful then attract regulatory attention and popular approbum and get beaten up by the regulators?
I can talk about sort of Tesla and how we've approached that, particularly on the vehicle side, as people would know that we've actually tried to encourage others. So we've released patents. I think in terms of where electric vehicles are now and where they will be in the future, we're certainly looking to get more investment into that space and encourage more people in. I think in terms of your discussion about the NEM and distribution companies and other companies and that sort of sense of incumbency. I never like the idea of putting any company type as an incumbent. I very much think it's a mindset, and that often comes down to the individuals or the strategy of that company. And we've worked with distribution companies. There's an example, one of the South Australian examples of a trial where that particular distribution network, South Australia Power Networks, was looking to upgrade their network. They wanted to do it with batteries instead, and the way that works is the homeowners either lease or own the batteries. They get a cheaper battery than they otherwise would, and also then the network, so the remaining customers of South Australia, get a cheaper upgrade than they otherwise would. So I think there's actually great examples of actually where there isn't a type of company you can put in as an incumbent or as a blocker. It's very much down to mindset.
Okay. Let me open it up now to general questions from the audience. So I think there is a couple of microphones wandering around. Yes, we have at least one. And we've got our first question down here. Please.
Hello, Sarah Davidson, Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand. Thank you for your panel discussion. If we accept that one of the main purposes of innovation policy is really to increase Australia's productivity and also to improve our national prosperity, what would you consider to be the most important thing that the federal government can do to enable this to happen in an environment of increasing disruption through new technologies? Thank you.
Okay, so just a simple question. What's the most important thing that the federal government can do in terms of helping technology improve productivity? I'm happy for anyone to lead off.
Sure. I think in Australia, it's really important that from a government perspective, we encourage an ecosystem that can set the rails that would be appropriate around creating a supportive system around how someone who would come up with a great idea would have an easier ability to be able to do that in Australia, as opposed to having an easier ability to be able to establish that same idea elsewhere. And today, we are very focused as an organisation around helping small businesses wanting to come up with a great idea of something they're wanting to do, to be able to take advantage of selling something online or what that might be, and to help them to be able to bring that to market. But we know through our research that it's really hard for them to be able to create and do what they want to do. Just to establish a business is difficult. To get that business funding is difficult. To establish it in a startup system is difficult. And it's probably harder here, in some cases, than it is anywhere else. So I think the opportunity exists to then help to provide a better system that can enable people with great ideas to be able to help them to accelerate how they could bring them to market, evolve them, and then potentially look to go and grow how they would then take those to the world.
Okay.
I'm going to answer just for my sector. I certainly have taken from this conference, particularly the panel before, about sort of the health sector and innovation there, that sound like some very impactful things that can be done. But for this stage, I'm going to focus on the electricity sector. And I think for us, actually, it's bringing the sort of the three objectives that we're looking to do together into one system. So many people would know that the sort of national electricity objectives do have a focus about the sort of the affordability of electricity and also the sort of the reliability, and both of those are important. I think we're really encouraged by the review that Minister Frydenberg mentioned yesterday that's looking at those two aspects of our electricity, but also how we maintain those whilst transitioning into a low emissions future. I think without having all of those together, then up to now, a number of different entities, be they start-up or be they already mature entities, have been sort of trying to balance those, but without a rule set that incorporate all of them. And I think moving towards that will be a very beneficial objective.
My world is mostly state-based regulations, but I'll have a go. I think the number one starting point is to just be excited. frankly. And that's been a Prime Minister's starting point, I think, and has been criticised because maybe there's not enough behind it, but it is the starting point, is being optimistic and being ready to engage and asking what could happen rather than what couldn't happen. I have been in some meetings where you could tell that the person on the other side of the table just sees this change as more work and a problem. And so if you start from being optimistic and excited about it, and then if I get one more thing, it'd be just work fast. And so the agility ask is quite important, because the innovation is going to keep coming faster and faster and faster. If the federal government can set a tone in terms of being fast in their decision making too, hopefully that'll set the pace.
Fast decision making in Canberra.
That's all we need.
Next question. Who have we got next? Otherwise you get one from me. Oh, we've got one up the back. I'll sneak mine in at some stage.
Michael Keating, Editor-in-Chief of Inside Canberra.
Sorry, just slightly louder, please.
Sure. Michael Keating, Editor-in-Chief of Inside Canberra. Much has been made about the Digital Transformation Office. It's actually a personal priority of the Prime Minister. And the Minister responsible, Angus Taylor, has given a speech about it yesterday in which he was pushing the government's perspective as the Digital Transformation Office. Can you reflect on your experiences with the DTO, what you think the government needs to be doing in that space, in the regulatory environment, and do you think in 10 years' time we'll look back at the DTO and say what they're doing now has enabled your businesses into the future?
Okay, DTO.
I haven't worked with them.
You haven't done? Have you, Andrew? Have you?
I'll have a go.
Yeah, all right. You seem to be the only one who nodded then, so I suspect
Sure.
Australia Post has interacted.
So probably one of the greatest things that needs to occur when any organisation was to start to embark on the notion of digitisation is giving permission. That you need to start to challenge how you want to provide your services to your customers in a way that helps to prioritise the experiences that they need to achieve. And I think the focus and the mandate of the DTO to be bringing that to life and to be given permission to start to look at how services could be genuinely delivered as a whole of government service, and to do that across local, state and federal government, is the fantastic opportunity that we now have to embark on how we move together. And I think the work that they have been doing is about getting that balance right. What we know is as we create new things, and as you want to create and digitise services, you need to kind of reduce the horizon of how you do that. The Digital Service Standard is a great step. Our ability to ensure that we are selective around doing a great job of one particular service, completing the evolution of that, and then moving on to a next one is good. The model as it's established that tries to drive pervasive change across government agencies by giving them a place to go so that they can in fact bring their own ideas to bear and embark on their journey of digitising what they are responsible for, are really good things. Really good things. And the biggest challenge within any organisation when they want to start to drive and provoke their own change is all the people that will enable it and the people that say they can't be enabled. And I think there is an active discussion, you can kind of read that online, that kind of exists for that, but the opportunity is here for us to create a fundamentally different way in which people can be able to interact with governments. From our own research, we know that 94% of people want to be able to interact digitally. But 70% of those actually want choice. So 30% of them are purely digital, completely sold, never want to work with a physical outlet ever again. But 70% of people then want choice. So the modern age interaction that we need to provide for is one that allows for people's choice so that they can choose how they engage with the modern services that we are able to create. And so this evolving and this maturing of how we deliver services for our customers is the thing that's critical. 94% want them to be available digitally. So we must be moving there. But 70% of people also want choice. And so that's the important evolution of the maturing discussion that I can see happening, and I think it's certainly something that's welcomed.
Got a question down here. I'm always worried when you give David the microphone. It's going to be on the energy markets, isn't it, David?
Not really, Stephen.
Oh.
It could be on anything from me. David Haviott, Energy Consumers Australia. It's on this question of disruption/innovation, and picking up a point from Martin Parkinson last night about incrementalism versus big change. One of the features of a lot of new economy businesses and the startup world is the language of lean startup, agile, scrum, as ways of doing things. That you get in there, you do something, you fix it, you improve it. Lara talked about the Tesla model, which is, you just keep on rolling out software upgrades and the car goes faster. My son-in-law has one, and he avows that is true. But the question I've got is that policy making still seems to be set in the old mindset, which is that you do everything by planning it out to the nth degree and then you roll it out. And so I suppose my question is the policy disruption that we need, or that is available to us, to start saying, well, you don't actually have to use that old paradigm for change. You could, in fact, start adopting this agile approach, and the genuinely agile approach that, the Prime Minister uses the word, but he doesn't mean it. Rephrase that, probably doesn't know what he means the way I mean it, which is that you do things incrementally with the idea that what I'm doing is a big change in parts and I don't have to be perfect each stage. Is that one of the things that we just need to do in policy making, to use that incremental agile approach?
Well, I'm the biggest advocate of speed and agility in decision making. I've been watching it happen a bit. So state transport is where we have most of our conversations, and I think it's been a real journey for those regulators, those ministers. Transport projects were typically probably doing well if it takes 5 years to agree and then another 5 years to build it. And here we are rolling out the whole business. Ride sharing is 2 years old in Australia, and it's being used by millions, and we can roll out a new feature every week as well. And so we've been interacting with a group that just hasn't been working that way, and they're excited about it. They have seen the benefits, and more of them are saying, let's bring this into our mix. And I think it's one of the most extreme examples where they'll be perfectly happy to spend 5 years making some decisions traditionally with the hard assets, but now we're coming along and saying, in the meantime, what can we do with what we've already got? Which is a lot of the benefits of innovation coming from. I think the numbers are like all of the startups in Australia can do all of their greatest ideas, and it won't contribute as much as improving productivity within bigger businesses. So making better use of what you've already got is critical. And that's what we do. We say there's already all these cars on the road, how can we use them smarter? There's lots of big projects, lots of tunnels being built, but in the meantime, what can we do with what we've already got? And we're finding governments who want to deliver on stuff, they do want to deliver on stuff and have stuff to announce, they're getting involved.
Actually, just before I pass over to you, Lara, I want to challenge you something on that, David. So the question's talking about, is it evolution or revolution? But when you say they're building tunnels and other stuff, surely that is exactly the old mindset of the public sector, which will be completely irrelevant in the future with self-driving cars, where you actually need less road space. So the last Victorian election was won or lost on the building of a great big under-the-city tunnel. And my reaction to it is, if any of the predictions on self-driving cars are even vaguely near correct in terms of time frame, you would never build that tunnel. Give people a whole bunch of money and say, look, enjoy yourself and this will compensate you for sitting into the queues on the Eastern Freeway before we get self-driving cars. But once we get the people off the roads or out of the driver's seat in the self-driving cars, there will be no congestion problem. So as soon as you say tunnels, that says to me, you haven't actually adjusted to the public policy revolution rather than evolution.
There's a range of scenarios. We're we're trying to build our own autonomous vehicles. They're on the streets being tested right now, so we clearly believe they've got a place in the future, but they're not ready, and when they're ready, it's going to take a while to build lots of them. So we're still very focused, I'm still very focused on today. These cars are, right now we've got a congestion problem, and still today people are buying cars faster than population is growing. So to suggest that we're moments away from not having a congestion problem and that no further infrastructure is required, I think is not based in where we are. There's a lot between here and there, and I think, build the roads, build the tunnels, and we'll just make better use of them as well. So I don't think anyone thinks that we're very close to the finish line. I think we're just getting started.
Lara, did you want to?
Yeah, I agree with yourself and David, just in terms of what increased agility can give in terms of policy making, particularly given the agility that we're seeing on the other side. And I think we're starting to see that different approaches as well. Recently, the AMC reached out to Tesla in terms of, and others in terms of commenting on a rule change. And I think that was partly recognising what David spoke about. Often when you're sort of a new innovative business focused on delivering product, you may not have the policy departments that others may have. And so I think different approaches to welcome in both sort of consumers and input from all parts of industry, I think that will be part of both the sort of the agility and also creating the atmosphere where the information that's needed comes out. I think one other part, just to add on that, Stephen, I think, I was talking about the software before, and I think it's something common to the three of us in terms of that pace. There's also just change in manufacturing, and, maybe a good example of that is people may know there was a gas leak in the Californian basin. They're heading up to winter, and so we're concerned about rolling blackouts. That project, the solution to that project is an 80 megawatt hour storage farm that was signed in September. It will be operating in December. So I think it's not only in the software space, but also in terms of physical processes that we're now getting this speed. And from a policy perspective, you need to be looking at both of those.
Did you want to?
I don't want to be the naysayer.
That doesn't
And
stop
I
me,
have,
so.
that's an interesting way to start. Every organisation needs to embark on their approach around how they evolve their culture to ensure that they embrace these notions of agility and how to work faster. And inside of our organisation, we have several hundred people that embrace the lean startup method, but we've evolved that a lot further with how we execute and create new products and services and bring them to market and do what we do. But what we know from doing that is it drives incrementalism in your business. So when you break the problem down into really smaller parts, because you can do a smaller part faster, you achieve a smaller outcome. But if that outcome's still a great thing for your customer, then you can be proud of that and how you move forward. And that might work in some cases with an evolution of policy. Incremental policy change and things like that can be facilitated that way. There's a different way of being able to use these methods, because these methods are just fundamentally around getting the right people together to make decisions faster. That's really what they do. And so being able to do that and facilitate that happens. But the challenge with it is part of the responsibility that exists at a federal level, and part of the responsibility that exists inside of large organisations is to drive major reform. Major reform is not something that you do incrementally. And major reform, we know there's probably no great fix to this. It does require consultation, it requires engagement, it requires a process of ensuring that there is research and understanding to make sure the rules and regulations are right as they would then necessarily need to go to apply. So I'd almost encourage that there's two phases of working. There's a phase that you can work in that can embrace a decision-making method that can help you to deliver incremental change faster and be more responsive. But if you're wanting to fundamentally restructure and change tomorrow and drive substantive reform, human beings are involved in that process. And we know that when it's a process that needs to bring millions of people along on a journey to do that, that's something that requires genuine consultation, listening, and the time to be able to do that. And I don't see necessarily that there's any great silver bullets for making that change.
Okay. Next question. One more if we've got time.
Maybe if the if the bells rang for half as long, that would speed up the decision making a little bit.
All right, I'm just going to do one quick one then, use my chair's right before we finish up. To what degree is there a risk of government picking winners? In other words, rather than making public policy that is open to innovation, trying to be the innovators themselves. And I'll use the NBN as an example. As I understand, we're about to roll out the standards for 5G mobile telephony, which will probably make significant parts of the NBN redundant. How do you avoid the government picking winners? How do you change that culture? I've got those stumps.
Maybe I can take a stab at that. Yeah,
right.
I'm going to answer in a different way, and,
Yeah.
and I think it's something that we often forget. Customers ultimately are who picks winners, and I think that's what we need to focus on. That's what governments need to focus on, and I think it's customers who pick winners.
Okay. All right.
I think the thing that we're all operating and grappling with now is that this digital age, and with the rise of technology, has enabled change to occur wonderfully quickly. And I use the word wonderfully because it's the opportunity that then presents to have organisations come from nowhere in a short period of time to be substantive even on a global scale. But I think the traditional notions of the business models that perhaps are thought about when policy is set need to be challenged. So whilst there's an amount of regulation that exists, that is great and still is needed, that then must help to provide for the economy that we're able to operate in, that make sure that we look after the environment, that we look after people, that we don't allow things to be extorted in an unbiased way. Some regulation was formed in an era when the business models were different, when models like what exists in these two wonderful businesses, right, weren't even thought of. So the frame, I think, of how regulation needs to be set needs to embrace the fact that there are models that exist today. There's a quickening of the decisioning that's happening, that's enabled not only through technology, but people who then embrace a different way of working to make decisions faster. And that we all needed to continue to invest, but potentially that investment needs to be more in the how things are done as opposed to what a big substantive change needs to be. Because what we know now is how organisations work, and the emerging organisations work does an incredible job of creating what their futures are.
Thank you. Let me now invite Professor Stephen Martin up for a vote of thanks to our panel.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and firstly let me thank you for your inspired direction here in putting questions to each of our panellists. But to Andrew, Lara and to David, thank you most sincerely for wrapping up what I think has been an outstanding contribution around the nature of where technology is, the benefits that it can bring to us, the fact that clearly if we're talking about government policy, delivery of policy, efficiency, all of those questions, regulation and so on, are very much alive and well, and we hope that we've stimulated some of that discussion today. I might say, Andrew, to you, I'm not sure that I will be looking out my window from the 12th floor of my apartment building in Docklands for the drone to deliver my mail anytime soon. As I said to somebody in Brisbane the other day, drones delivering pizzas, I don't get it, quite frankly, but it was in New Zealand. So, but could I say to our three colleagues here on your behalf, thank you so much for their presentations. Please show it in the usual way.